Today's discussion will be presented in 3 sections since we're recording it for radio broadcast on Federal News Radio 1500 AM. You're welcome to post questions and comments during the session, and we'll try to answer them online. Welcome to the discussion today. My guests are Pam Dyson, the Chief Information Officer of the Securities and Exchange Commission, Tim Benjen, the IT Development Director for the Navy Reserve Forces Command, and David Shive, the Chief Information Officer for the General Services Administration. Welcome to the panel today.
Thank you.
Before we get started, let me set some context for our discussion. Digital transformation is happening across government. Citizens are driving the rate of change through their expectations, and what we've seen over the past few years is the growth and the acceptance of things like cloud, mobility, APIs or application programming interfaces, and the ability to better understand user behavior like never before. This is data analytics, and this is what agencies are taking advantage of. The evolutions of these technologies, those who are doing the cloud, mobility, they're having a better job. They're doing a better job of meeting their customers' needs. IDC Government Insights says agencies are embarking on this transformation journey, and it's definitely a marathon, not a sprint. They absolutely need to understand the return on investment of moving off these legacy systems and modernizing their processes. This includes the long-term life cycle of the cost of new technology, but it also includes the potential savings or cost avoidance of moving away from the current infrastructure setup. The challenges are immense to move to this transformation. A recent survey finds the workforce, including executives, need to be more tech savvy and have different skill sets. Agency IT infrastructures are more likely to be an obstacle than an enabler of digital transformation. But good news here, help is on the way. The survey says organizations are looking at, and in many cases using, emerging technologies such as software-defined networking or SDN, network functions virtualization, and they're doing a better job than ever of understanding the increased value of data analytics. SDN, NFV, data analytics, mobile devices, these are all providing agencies a greater flexibility to address citizens' needs, whether they arise from commenting on a rule or, in Pam's case, looking for a 10K filing, I'm sure. We're going to talk about that and the move to the cloud there. In the end, we all realize these technologies really are just the enabler to improve citizen services and satisfaction in government. But without improving the underlying technologies and processes, the end results will be harder to achieve. So with that context in place, let me turn to our panel. Once again, my guests, Pam Dyson, the CIO of the Securities and Exchange Commission, Tim Benjen, the IT Development Director for the Navy Reserve Forces Command, and David Shive, the CIO of the General Services Administration. I'm going to start at that far end of the table with Pam and start with this idea of digital transformation. You guys have been on this path for quite a bit.
Yes.
We've talked about this several times. Talk a little bit about what your strategy looks like for digital transformation.
So certainly the pace of technology has really picked up over the last couple of years, and our strategy is really to keep pace with the industry, not just for our internal customers and stakeholders at the SEC, but also for our investors and for the public as well. So we've done a lot in this space to move us towards digital transformation. Some of the areas that we worked on, one is just automating our processes and our workflows, automating the way the data comes into the organization so that data is more accessible and usable by our stakeholders. One of the other things that we've done is we've really advanced our data analytics program. So being able to take in that raw data and run analytics on it, not just to inform our examiners and our investigators, but also for things like our IT systems. The data that we use now, we're able to run analytics on, how our systems are performing, where we can increase performance and do various things as well. We've been looking at mobile technologies for quite some time. The American public, as well as our constituents at the SEC, want to be able to access our resources from, various different devices, at the touch of their finger. We want to give interfaces that are more corporate in look and feel and ease of use to our citizens. So we've been looking at mobile applications, doing more with mobile devices for quite some time. And then, of course, cybersecurity is always, on the forefront. That's integrated in all of our decision-making and our planning and processing to do more from a digital standpoint and to ensure that we can secure that data. So we have all of those streams working at the SEC, and we've seen a lot of efficiency in our IT program as a result.
You said the strategy in part is to keep pace with all the change.
Yeah.
Do you feel like what's driving you is the citizen expectation, or is something else driving the SEC, meaning the investors are going, well, I can't find what I need, this is not working for me?
So it's both. It's driving expectation, again, ease of use. The way you go to your local bank and do mobile banking and online banking is the expectation that the public has, and as they interface with a lot of these systems, and also keeping pace with our the people that we regulate. The banks and the exchanges invest a lot of money in their IT programs and how they are presenting data to the public and how they're using data. So we're trying to keep pace with that. We're outgunned in that department and the funding department, but there are things that we can do along the edges and the margins with our program, and a big start is to digitize a lot of the content and data that's coming into the agency, and again, automate those workflows. That gives us huge efficiency and productivity across our divisional areas at the SEC.
And when we talk about driving change, we've got to turn to Tim, the Navy Reserves. Obviously, you guys are trying to recruit people, keep them in, retain recruitment, all those things, and they have a different set of expectations as well. Tim, talk about your modernization, digital transformation.
Yeah, so as you mentioned, our target audience is our reserve force, and so that's basically our citizen that we're targeting. We have several different strategies that we're moving out on, initiatives, if you will. Mobile, we're doing a lot of work in the mobile environment. We have a BYOD mobile app available right now. It's the first one in the DoD that allows you to access sensitive information. And our reservists, we only get them 2 days a month, 2 weeks a year, so we don't have a whole lot of hands-on time with our reservists. So our IT infrastructure is very lacking in that regard. So when they come in to drill reserve on the weekend, they have to share one computer amongst usually about 13 people, so they can't get a lot of work done. So we need to provide them, without giving them a government furnished equipment, we have to provide them a means to get their work done, whether it be at their job site on their reserve weekend or on their own time at home. So what we've done is we've leveraged their own devices, the BYOD, bring your own device, and given them an application that they can log in via their, we have authentication for our CAT cards, and they can log in and get all that work done, and that goes for travel, work, job assignments, things like that. We're also creating some non-sensitive websites that they can access on any mobile device, iPads, Android tablets, iPhones, and even on the computer. We want to create basically a one-stop shop for our reservists to go to and get all of the work done. Right now they have to go to a multitude of websites. I've heard it anywhere from 50 to 60 websites that they need to go to do pieces of their job. We want to combine that into one central location that they can access without having to have a special device to log into a website using their identification card. And at least so they can get started, they can know where they need to go, what they need to do. That's one of the biggest challenges for our force, is just to know what to do, because we only get them so minimal amount of time throughout the year. Those are our major initiatives. We're moving to the cloud as well. We have an Office 365 pilot that we call Reserve Cloud Connect. It is powered by Office 365 environment. We're piloting that for the big Navy. They're coming on board here shortly. We're doing that in parallel with the Air Force. They're doing it as well. So that's going to be a big move for us as far as ease of use for our force. They don't have to come in and use a computer to use Office, email, edit Office documents. They can do it from anywhere, from any device, via the Office online products. That's another major initiative of ours.
So I want to dig into the BYOD for a second. What did you guys have to go through to move? Because when you talk about digital transformation, part of that is, okay, well, what can I do online, and what can I, if I have to do everything in paper, or if I have to use an old, green screen system, or wait in line to use it, getting that BYOD through, was that just a cost avoidance? We could either buy computers and they could sit here a lot, or we could have one computer and have people wait in line. But if we, what was the decision there?
The primary driver was cost avoidance. We did see a little bit of a cost savings because we can have some of our users, especially in the leadership positions, they have government furnished equipment. We can start pulling that back now that they have this BYOD solution. So there was a little bit of a cost savings, primarily cost avoidance. It avoided at least a tenth of the cost if we were to, or actually 9/10 of the cost, if we were to issue government furnished equipment to all of our sailors that needed to access our systems. To get around the security piece, you had mentioned cybersecurity, Pam.
We'll talk about
okay, we'll talk about that later. Okay,
give us a little bit of cyber.
Our basic policy is no data at rest on the personal devices. So we do everything via web transactions, via websites. We're creating all of our websites to be responsive, so they look good. They're very user-friendly on any device they're accessing it from. And all of the transactions happen on the back end on our side, whether they be in our legacy IT infrastructure or whether they be in the cloud where we're moving to now. Everything will be in that secure environment. Nothing will be resident on the user's phone.
I think that's such a huge change from the data at rest piece that we've seen over and over. Let me turn to Dave Shy from GSA. You guys also have been out in front in many regards. We've talked over the years about, Tim mentions Office 365. You guys have been email in the cloud for several years, but there's a whole host of things that are going on. Talk a little bit about your digital transformation.
Great, thanks. So yeah, we had the benefit of moving out probably in 2011, 2012 into deep and meaningful moves to the cloud and things like that. What we've found is that digital transformation it's a good body of work to do, but the real value is when you do it with a customer-centered design and user focus when you do that. That's good for IT as a whole, whether you're doing digital transformation or not. So we've moved out in a few different ways. When we build or buy, we assess something called heuristics so that you can see, is this thing going to be useful and usable for customers? We found increasingly that business process reengineering needs to be a key component in any type of digital transformation. If all you're doing is putting a digital overlay on a fundamentally broken business process, you've gained nothing. So, so we build that in our sprints in the very beginning of our transformation activities to make sure that the process is as optimized and as efficient as possible. And then we put a digital overlay on top of that to make it technically efficient and optimized. We do things like we make sure we follow US web design standards, which are focused on presenting data in the most useful way, in a way that doesn't tax the eye, but also presents the data in an easily consumable way. We actually had the pleasure of working with US Digital Service on co-developing the web design standards, so we drive that through all of our development activities. We're also very intentional about leveraging our private industry partners in this work. We're a mid-sized IT shop, but we can only do so much. We're absolutely dependent on our industry partners to be successful here, and they've poured massive amounts of time into their customer-centered design and their user experience for their tools. We'd be foolish to not leverage that. So we use as-a-service stuff whenever we can because they've already done that work, and we stay away from tailoring and modifying that stuff to work in the federal space, which tends to break business process rather than facilitates it. What we found is when we use our industry partner tools, when we design according to great customer experience and user experience standards, and we use common standards like the US Web Design Standard, it presents a government to the citizens that we serve that's very familiar to them. They're interacting with technology every day of their lives, and they're doing so on predictable tools, whether it's social media or office automation. And when we can mimic that, and we can mimic those best practices, it makes their interactions with government much more seamless.
I want to go back to the business process reengineering piece and then jump in for the rest of the panel. That we hear this time and again, don't just lift and shift, right? Make the change. Is that, again, on the front end, the most difficult part of this digital transformation is giving up the old?
Yeah, so I've been in IT for 30 years now, and this is not a problem that's only in government. It exists out in the private sector as well. Most large transformations fail because of organizational change management issues. The technology, I don't want to minimize the hard work that the technologists do to do this hard work, but it's become a rote process. If they follow the technology transformation process, it's going to work. You don't have failures at the technology layer anymore. It's usually at the organizational change management. So yes, we pour massive time and energy into that, working with our business partners to assess what it is they need, to listen very carefully to what they need, and then overlay technology best practice on top of that. Because if a customer says, I think that screen should be yellow instead of blue, and it's going to cost the government $1 million to make that change, we're right to push back and say, well, you know what, that doesn't matter. Actually, the best background is a pale green because that's what's easiest on the eye. So that kind of bilateral two-way communication with our customer is one of the keys to success.
Pam, jump in too, because you have a similar challenge.
Sure, absolutely. At the SEC, we invested heavily in the business processing re-engineering piece of this. We've had a number of consultant firms come in and help us do that. That is, phase one of our planning and rollout of any new modernization effort is to do that business process re-engineering. How can we streamline processes? In addition to that, we also look at systems that we can retire as a part of that process. As a part of automating the workflow itself, are there siloed systems and practices that can also be retired? We've seen a lot of cost savings from that. But absolutely, the business process re-engineering, which leads right into the requirements development phase of that, are two of the key components to the success of any modernization.
And I imagine the first question you ask is, what's the outcome, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's what we hear time and again. And you have to sometimes bring the mission people back from the old, well, I wanted to do this, I wanted to do that, and what about this shiny bell and whistle, or just, does that question, are the mission folks from your perspective?
That's the starting point. Absolutely. Yeah. What's the outcome? What is it we're trying to do? What is the requirement that we're trying to meet? We start with that, and then we move backwards from that to see how it's being done today and how we can make that more streamlined and efficient. How we can bring automation and digitalization into play.
All right, Dave, I want to catch up with you, but we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll jump into your thoughts on this. You're listening to the panel discussion, The Pathway to Digital Transformation in Government, sponsored by Juniper Networks on federalnewsradio.com and 1500 AM.